Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on PUT TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today our guest is Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sacha. Glad to be here as always. Almost didn't make it here because something went crazy. Went crazy with the machine. I'll say, oh my goodness! Just in the nick of time, I popped in, so I'm here.
Excellent. Jonathan, so Zelensky had very successful trip to Arab territory, this time in Saudi Arabia. There was a big meeting, and Zelensky did extremely well. So, what's your impression of that event?
About that Zelensky is extremely well. Say again.
Yeah, Zelensky did extremely well in that meeting.
Oh yes.
They all embrace Zelensky's offer of technology and helping against drones, and they were very attentive and signing of a deal. I think Trump is a little bit resentful of that because, first of all, Zelensky is obviously part of his enemies rather than friends, in spite of the fact that he is helping Trump's client states, which he was supposed to defend but didn't. And so this way, I think on the background today, we have that MAGA is hosting Russian Duma people, 5 people from the Russian Duma who started the war in Ukraine and who is now fighting and helping Iran to destroy American targets. Oh, well, what's going on? I think maybe, I was thinking myself for about 2 hours how to explain it, but I came on with only with one answer. I don't know if you will agree. It's a part of tackle strategy. It's obviously that American cannot defeat Iran on their territory. It's just historically, military point of view, it's just impossible because all last, I don't know, probably 10, maybe 20 American presidents were dreaming about conquering Iran, and they all backed off because they understood how difficult it is, what a challenge, and how much efforts would have to go into it. For what? What is the remuneration for that? Very little, in fact. Okay, so that's why they backed off. But Donald Trump decided to be one who actually finally did it. So now it's a time that without full scale, not the force of 7,000 people. No, that's nothing. They need a force of probably 250,000 and most likely 500,000 people on the ground to really conquer Iran, change government, and do all the rest of the things. Because Iran already said that they are mobilizing 1 million people army, and they still have, about their weapons. They demonstrated lately a completely new weapons that nobody had expected from them. On the other hand, we don't know how many weapons Iran has. Maybe not too many.
Right. Keep in mind that might be very well be similar. If they've demonstrated a new weapon, that this might very well be similar, and I would draw a historical parallel to when the Soviet Union under Khrushchev, when they test fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. And this began a period in which Khrushchev was engaged in what the West came to call, subsequently called strategic bluffing. he was saying we can produce ICBMs, and we can turn out ICBMs like sausages, and we will produce more of them unless the West is more accommodating in its policies. And of course, with our use of our U-2 overflights of the Soviet Union,
That was a little later.
yeah, a little later, they at first the Soviets appeared to be very successful in their strategic bluffing because American defense journals and publications of the late 1950s were making predictions that the Soviet Union would have thousands of ICBMs by the early 1960s. They were making these predictions, but they were completely taken in by the strategic bluffing campaign at first. But then once American intelligence had the means to overfly Soviet territory, eventually they discovered that the Soviet Union had, in fact, had six intercontinental ballistic missiles, and none of them were in silos. They were all above ground, and it was estimated that they would take about almost a day to actually prepare to fire them, which meant in theory that had the United States decided to attack and take out those ICBMs, they could have done that with their bomber force because the Soviets would not have been able to react and get them fired fast enough. So again, with this, Iran may be taking a leaf from that kind of deception also. They have this new weapon. All right, very well. What kind of capacity do they really have to produce significant numbers of this weapon? And have we really seen it in action? And so you can be sure that the U.S. intelligence community is very, very hard at work trying to figure out, okay, what do we know? What sort of capacity do they have? And then that in turn is going to be interacting with the U.S. defense industrial complex and say, okay, what means do we have to counter this particular weapon? How fast can we produce it?
I believe it's a little bit more complicated than that. First of all, Iran wanted to demonstrate, which it did, that they have these weapons. It doesn't matter how many, 5, 10, maybe only 2, but they have it. So if they can have 1, 2, they can have 3 and 4, and maybe even more. It's number one. Number two, there is now open help from Russia. They're not hiding it anymore. Actually, they are almost bragging that they are helping the so-called the Iranian brother. They're helping the Iranian brother.
Really? I didn't realize they were claiming a familial relationship with the Iranians. Okay,
yeah.
That's very interesting. Of course, when you're desperate enough and you've just lost over 1.2 billion soldiers in your mistaken invasion of and very poorly calculated invasion of Ukraine, you start being very desperate to find who is actually my brother, and so the Iranians start looking pretty good.
But see, John, I don't discount Chinese brothers.
Who want the brothers who want part of your territory.
Yeah. Well, sometimes brothers are fast.
Yes, that's my territory. No, it's my territory. Yeah, I got.
Father said that this is your territory and this is my territory. No, but you see, it's not a joke. What's happening is that Russia has a unique way of helping Iranians through Caspian Sea, because there is on Caspian Sea it's the same waterways. And although Israel did bomb this, at least the Iranian portion of the Caspian Sea, but of course he couldn't liquidate all infrastructure and everything else. They did it. But you see now Russia has very little to lose. In Ukraine, they are losing the war badly.
Yes.
And even if they're not losing the war, it's impossible for them to win the war either.
Right.
So, okay, they're stuck there big time. But now if they realize that they're stuck in Ukraine, so there is no more sending fresh blood to Ukraine or weapons or so on, because it's a losing proposition. They're not getting anywhere. So they might as well retrench there and just keep it the front and not allow Ukrainians to go farther, but even that is not going to work. Um, so Mark is saying breaking news: Iranian hacker has got into Patel's personal email.
Well,
Shit happens.
yeah, yeah. That's about. Can we translate that for our Russian viewers? All three of them. Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Patel now has to get even. He has to go into this Iranian hackers email, and so
Or
then
either that, or he has to upgrade his own self defense software really fast.
yeah, I think they should. So now it seems to me, unfortunately, it could lead us straight to the World War III.
Now that Sasha is a core concern, which I hardly share with you at this point, because now instead of it has become more clear that the war against Iran and the war between Russia and Ukraine and the West, that they are no longer, if it wasn't clear before, it has become even more clear now that the wars are linked. And
I think Trump, if he will pursue a TACA strategy, which at this point would be actually a wise strategy. So what he can do, he can say that, well, what's happened is that, well, first of all, we believe that you can create nuclear bomb. So obviously we were against it. And furthermore, Israel convinced us that it's time to attack Iran right now and so on. And that meeting with Ayatollah and all his helpers happened. Actually, it wasn't even US who bombed that. It was Israel who started that. Israel destroyed Ayatollah and all his helpers and so on. So Americans were basically bystanders in that affair. And now it's quite obvious that there is no ill feelings between American people and Iranian people. We always respected Iranian people. It's a 5,000 years old civilization. There are a lot of Iranians living in the United States, and they're a great contributor to economy and to arts and everything else. So it's time to, okay, misunderstanding happens sometimes. Okay, it's time to fix these things. And if Netanyahu also wants to stop the war, please do so. Now, if not, then Netanyahu will fight one-on-one against Iran. US will cut their losses and Iranian losses and just get away from it all. And that could work in Trump's favor simply because stock market tells him to do so, in my opinion.
Yeah, you keep in mind the stock market is not in and of itself a predictor. It is a reflection of market sentiment. It is a reflection of the consumer sentiment of those who buy stock in the market. So it reflects the outlook, the degree of optimism or pessimism, if you will, that the American investors have about the future. Now, if the stock market is going up, then that reflects that the increasing American confidence that the economy is going to do well. If the stock market starts declining, it also reflects inversely a degree of lack of confidence or pessimism or possibly fear of the future of the American economy. And so in this case, you have then investors going to other assets such as gold or silver or bonds or something else other than the American stock market. And I have my own experience with investing in the stock market, which right now personally I stay out of it. I have done my investing and gotten what reasonable return I got out of it. But at this point, I certainly would not be investing in the American stock market because events are too volatile. And if it would reflect, from my standpoint, it would be caution would be the watchword here. But in any case, you are quite correct in that the situation has become much more complex thanks to the start of the war against Iran by the U.S. and Israel to one degree of cooperation or another. It has made the situation with the war in Ukraine, it almost makes the war in Ukraine a sideline. It almost does. But fortunately, and not because the United States has given up on Ukraine, but quite the contrary. Ukraine probably has, at least for President Trump, Zelensky has surprised President Trump with the degree of resourcefulness and the fact that you remember last year or so ago when yesterday when President Trump was saying to Zelensky that you don't have any cards. And Zelensky was probably thinking, "Oh, yes, I do, and I'm going to watch me play them." And he played them very skillfully, and he continues to play them very skillfully. I think what has probably aggravated, I would say, or possibly, let's just say surprised President Trump, is the fact that Zelensky is displaying much more resourcefulness and success in playing the cards that he has, and he's developing some new ones, I would imagine. He's displaying more success than President Trump and his advisors expect. And that would probably surprise, if not annoy them to a certain extent, because it complicates their planning. And now they have to rethink what the calculus is. So yeah, all right, you're right. Now it's become, and so it's complicating the calculus for American planners as to, okay, they're saying, okay, this operation will be over soon. Well, gee, where did we hear that sound before? We heard that sound from the Russians when they first invaded Ukraine. They thought it was this is only going to take a few days. It'll be all over. And 4 years later, no, it's not over. And the Russians have been desperately trying to win at the diplomacy table what they could not possibly win on the battlefield. So now they are stuck and taking huge losses. And it's like I used the analogy before, for the Russians, the war in Ukraine has become like being caught in a Texas hailstorm. They can't run away, they can't hide, and they can't make it stop.
What's interesting is that both Trump and Zelensky, they're former showmen.
Oh yeah, Zelensky's a comedian. Yes. He was a comedian, which is rather remarkable when you think about it. Of course, yes. President Reagan was once a movie actor.
I saw his movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the major difference between Zelensky and Trump is that the financial component in Zelensky's case is much less obvious, maybe close to non-existent, except that in Trump strategies and everything else, the financial component is everything. So for him, there are three scenarios now. Number one is Taco, get the hell out of there. Number two, the limited so-called military operation involving few thousand of American troops. Some of them will be killed, some of them will not. And what is the result of that operation? Nothing of substance, really. It could help to get close to the settlement of the war, but it will be no change of regime in Iran by any means. And number three, it's a full-scale invasion, calling for 200, 300, 500,000 American troops, taking over all Iran and changing the government and do all that thing. A lot of people then will be killed. Now we're looking at about 20, 30,000, maybe more. But for Trump, he's assessing all three scenarios. What is my financial benefits in scenario number one? What is number two? And what is they are in number three? That's the only thing what he cares. There is nothing else even to talk about. So therefore, I think for American people, the best scenario would be Taco. Get the hell out of there. Forget about Iran, at least for a while, and cut your losses, get investors enthusiastic about it. The war is over now. The economy is going to improve, and so all that, because that what counts at the end of the day. It's not how many Ayatollahs you're going to kill or how many Iranian this army top leaders still will be killed. It doesn't matter. You can kill 1,000 Iranians or 50,000 Iranians. What's the benefit for American people?
Yeah. Now, using that calculus, for example, I would say a variation. I would say the most likely outcome, given what we're seeing right now, and what we know of the perceptions and the thinking as displayed thus far by the administration, I would say that the most likely outcome would be that President Trump, in effect, does what I was recommending that the Russians might do: declare victory and go home.
Absolutely. Who is going to dispute U.S. victory in Iran?
Right.
Who, a single person say, no, it's not true. Who?
All of the military events would support such a claim.
Absolutely.
All the targets struck and so forth. And arguably, one could make a credible case for saying, okay, we have effectively delayed, if not totally eliminated, we have effectively delayed Iranian development of a nuclear weapon. They could make that argument. We could do that. We had also largely degraded their capability for striking Western targets, for striking Western so forth.
Jonathan, it's a strategy that somebody called it when you are cutting the grass. The grass, even if you cut it properly, so it will sometime it start grow again. So
yep.
The same thing with Iran nuclear program or missile program.
That would be a sensible analogy. Say, okay, we've mowed the grass. We'll wait until it needs trimming again. But in the meantime, we suggest that you behave yourselves. Yep. Diplomatically, we'd be saying that. And the Iranian leadership may or may not take that advice to a certain extent. They may, in fact, lay low for a short while and try to build up their resources quietly. But certainly, I think the absolute worst possible outcome is if the U.S. actually committed to a full-scale invasion of Iran itself, which would be all you have to do is look at the geography. Look at the geography of that. Say, go ahead and do some. The war gamers there, and the Pentagon does have a wargaming unit. They conduct military war games of potential military actions. They've been doing that ever since they've been doing that for most of the 20th century, starting after World War I. And they were wargaming scenarios for World War II, a potential war in the Pacific. But, and oh, by the way, nice side story there. The Navy, to its credit, had wargamed the war with Japan in the Pacific. And there were two things which their war games did not anticipate. One thing, the naval strategists had wargamed a potential Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And they said, yes, it is possible that the Japanese could successfully attack Pearl Harbor. But they drew the wrong conclusion. They said it would be strategic suicide for the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor.
By the way, the Japanese general,
Yamamoto, yes,
agreed exactly with this point.
Yes, he said we could attack Pearl Harbor. We could run rampant for a while in the Pacific, but eventually, what he said was after the attack on Pearl Harbor, as you recall, he said, "I fear that all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve." Exactly. And he was right. Yeah. But the other thing that the war games themselves failed to anticipate, they failed to anticipate the Japanese use of kamikazes. For some reason, American planners have always had trouble with the idea of an enemy taking perfectly good aircraft and flying them into things. We had trouble with it in World War II, and we had trouble with it with 9/11. We could not imagine terrorists flying aircraft into buildings. Failed to anticipate it. But in any case, so while there are some instruments that we have for predicting, we will have similar difficulties predicting what the Iranians might do, not just in this war, but also in as a potential strategic countermove in any future confrontations with Iran. And keep in mind what Clausewitz once said: in war, the result is never final. There is no such thing as the only way that you can have a complete solution, I hesitate, I don't like to use the phrase final solution because yeah, that brings back bad memories. But if you can, but a solution in which the result is final is if you have what has been called a Carthaginian peace, where in the Punic Wars, where Rome completely eliminated Carthage as a viable nation state, plowed over their fields with salt, and destroyed their agricultural base, and essentially eliminated Carthage as a nation. Now, short of that, you are not going to have a lasting, permanent solution, regime change or otherwise, with Iran, because the amount of resources required would be absolutely prohibitive for the United States, particularly if the United States ends up going it alone. Even Israel is not going to want to try to impose a lasting regime change on Iran. What Israel would like to do is permanently remove its ability to produce nuclear weapons. And even that might be arguably a goal that is just too difficult to achieve with their available resources. Keep in mind, even though Israel has a justifiable fear of its neighbors constituting an existential threat to the existence of Israel, because Israel is perfectly aware that its neighbors would like to see nothing better than for every Jew occupying the nation of Israel to be eliminated. They know that there are those people who would advocate that.
Jonathan, I've heard one analysis. Actually, I think it was an American historian about present situation in Iran, which completely changed after last year's 12 Days War. In that war, Iranians realized that they don't have any antidote against Israeli and American bombing and so on. And they completely restructured their response and their abilities by, first of all, getting a new type of weapons, maybe with the help of Russians, Chinese, or something. Okay. Number two, they realize that there has to be a symmetric response to any actions from America and Israel, which they're demonstrating right now. And number three, they didn't anticipate that America and Israel will take out all their leadership and their assistants and helpers, advisors and all that stuff. They didn't anticipate that. But surprisingly, even that played very positive meaning for Iranians, because now instead of getting together and unite against Ayatollah, whom most of the population hated, now since he was killed, guess by who? By Americans and Israelis. So now they're uniting against all this horrible generals who are torturing their own people and so on. But doesn't matter. They're uniting against external enemies. And that makes now Iran very dangerous, because from now on, I think even after last year, 12 Days War, now they are going to do everything possible and impossible, actually, to get to the nuclear weapons and keep on developing the ballistic abilities and drones. Russia now sends absolutely brilliant new drones. They call, instead of Shahed, they call them Geranium 2, which are based on Shahed but vastly improved with all the characteristics and so on. I saw in one of the programs, I saw the picture of that drone. It's almost like a war machine. It's incredible and large. So that war, and Iran, somebody said from their people that they actually haven't even started the real war. They haven't attacked American embassy in Europe and do the terroristic attacks on American soil. That's all ahead. That haven't even started yet at all. They're still in a kind of negotiations here and there and so on. We'll see how it will develop. But the situation is much more probably dangerous even for US than propaganda in Washington saying that we already obliterated all army, all ships and troops and this, generals and ayatollahs and everything. So if you did all that, why the war is still going on? How to answer the question?
Yeah, that because now our enemy is aware that we have all this vast capability, and they have to, if they're going to, they can either, well, they're either going to give up, in which case, which to them is tantamount to suicide. That's basically, it sort of mirrors the Japanese attitude. Once we shut off their oil embargo, it shut off their oil and their steel. The Japanese back then had only two choices: either surrender, which to the Japanese mindset of the time was absolutely unthinkable. They preferred death to surrender, or they did like as Yamamoto talked, they gamble and attack Pearl Harbor. So they attacked the American base, even though in the long run it turned out to be strategic suicide. In the interim, it caused the United States to have to engage in a very costly war. Although ultimately victorious, it was still nevertheless a very costly war for the United States. So we have a parallel here again. We have a parallel where Iran, we may have succeeded militarily on the battlefield, at least for all the visible surface statistics that we are aware of, but have we affected the opponent's political resolve? And
I'd like to mention something, that today Iranians have a weapon that Japanese didn't have at the time. It's American economy. It's American stock market. It's $6 per gallon at the gas station.
Yeah, they're striking asymmetrically at the economy, which Japan absolutely could not do.
No,
the United States was virtually invulnerable. As a matter of fact, the United States had this vast untapped strategic industrial potential. It required a focus to be activated, and it was. And once it was activated, the United States became the most powerful war machine in recorded human history.
Absolutely.
And by the way, the part of the consequences of that is reflected, oddly enough, in the American food production. American food production was fully mobilized, and it carried over into the post-war period, where the United States food production was just simply functioning at wartime levels. And it's reflected even today, if you can imagine. Well, I read an article where it described what surprises foreign visitors to the United States the most. When they come to the United States, they are stunned by the size of the food portions in American restaurants. It's just more food that they can possibly eat in one sitting, and which is, of course, you have the American custom of, you have too much food. Here, take some home. Take it. Here's some packages. Take it home with you. And they do that. They expect you to. They don't expect you to waste the food. They expect you to take any excess that you can't eat there. Take it home with you. Have it later. Heat it up. Microwave it. And the foreign visitors to the United States are just absolutely floored, because. And also part of that, as my wife told me, was part of the American tradition of how they ate, because when America was mostly agricultural, American families who worked on farms, they had to get up early to take care of the animals. And they had to have a lot of food for breakfast in order to give them enough to work on. And it affected their entire life was built around large amounts of food available when you needed it, to have the energy to take care of the animals and produce the food and grow the crops. That has carried over into the 21st century, because we have. Yeah.
I remember in the early 90s when Soviet Union collapsed, and people from there, they could travel now freely to the West, to the And some of my friends and relatives, they came over to Canada, to Toronto. And once I took them into one of the supermarkets, they, they were stunned. They were looking at the cheeses. It's in Russia, in every store, they would get two, maximum three varieties of cheeses. Here they had 250 varieties of cheeses. And
Canada was reflecting what was happening in America was also happening in Canada.
Absolutely. So they were stunned. They were speechless. And so we went home, relaxed. Next day, when are we going to supermarket? We want to see it again.
Yeah.
So first 3 or 4 days, every day we were going to supermarkets and they were spending their hours to look at this. Okay, look at the kalbasa. How many varieties of kalbasa? How many varieties of cheese? And the milk and milk products and meat and fruits and vegetables, and they were going crazy, really.
Yeah, and there was an American motion picture, American movie, it was starring Robin Williams called Moscow on the Hudson.
Yes.
Yes, you saw that scene where Robin Williams, as a Russian immigrant, is coming in there. He's making his first visit to an American supermarket, and he's walking around and he looks at all the varieties of coffee. Just doesn't, not just one or two, but a whole variety of different kinds of coffee. And he has an emotional breakdown. Too much. And he just could not believe that such a thing could exist. And so but all of this, Sasha, simply reflects the entirely different mindset of both the Americans from the rest of the world.
And also, when we went second day, we went to the same supermarket because so they looked and they were impressed and so on. But then they said, okay, tomorrow let's go to a different supermarket because maybe that one that you were taking us, it's only for government.
Right.
Okay.
Take them to a. As a matter of fact, in America, what you could do is, okay, if you want to travel a little bit, let's take you to a poorer, a less prosperous. Yeah. And they go there and they say, oh my God, it's all over the place. They did not expect to find it because of the American distribution system and the local farms and all this entire network of, no matter where you go, it is the place where if you wanted to see a relatively poor portion of America, that would be in the Appalachian Mountains, in the Appalachia, in a place where I used to go to visit my grandmother's house when she lived in Cumberland, Kentucky. And back then, Cumberland, Kentucky, it is a relatively depressed area, and it made me sad because while it wasn't poverty stricken, but you could tell it was like being caught in a time machine, going back several decades. You can see that this was an area that had been, to a certain extent, left behind by the passage of time.
Is it where from J.D. Vance from?
Yeah, if you were to ask J.D. Vance, and he caught him in a frank moment, I said, doesn't that strike you as that there are some areas of America to one extent or another are somewhat left behind by time. And so it's the distribution of wealth in America is certainly not perfect. It's better than most places, but it certainly is not perfect. But at least you have the opportunity to try, and you get a lot of very motivated people like J.D. Vance who have come from less well-developed areas of America, and that you might understand might have fueled his ambition to get out of that area and improve his life. So you could, to that extent, you could understand, why he has gone the way he has in his career. So it's all a matter of perception. As one of my favorite radio preachers once said, he said that 10% of life is what happens to me, and the other 90% is how I react to it.
That's a very good approach. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened.
You cannot control what happens to you in life. You always have control over what you choose to do about it. And that's that's one of the premises of the American system. You know, the right to have the right to life. All Americans should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, note that they did not say you have the right to happiness. You have the right to pursue it. That's
Yeah,
the
very,
you
very important
you
point.
have the right to try. We're going to let you try.
Yeah, and some people are successful in their pursuit of happiness, and a lot of people they don't. But
Yeah,
it's always available. You
right.
keep trying.
And it does not say that just because they don't make it on the first try, that doesn't mean they can't keep trying.
Yeah, Walt Disney took 7 tries until he became Walt Disney.
And in the result you we all agree was very impressive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, Khrushchev, when he made his visit to the United States, he was angry. He was angry because he did not get to see Disneyland.
So if somebody is not pursuing anything and they keep working from 9 to 5 and at the end of the day is dying, so he has 0 failures. Walt Disney had 7 failures and made it 8 times around. So who is more successful? One who has no failures, one who had several failures but made it at the end.
Well, Thomas Edison was asked about, why he had so many failures in his experiments. He said he didn't for example, in pursuit of the light bulb, he said that he didn't consider any of his failed experiments failures. He now knew of several hundred methods that don't work.
Yeah, that's right.
He now knows what doesn't work. He can eliminate those paths, and until he finds something that does work. So
Absolutely.
it's how you look at it.
Exactly. Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program. I think we will get together on Tuesday, same place, same time. And we will have a lot of new information.
This is becoming a very fascinating exercise. It is a very it is trying to it's like trying to hop on a Ferris wheel that's in motion.
Yeah,
to run fast enough to get
the
on.
question is that by Friday, to which is today and tomorrow, all these troops, 7,000 coming out,
Yes,
they will be already in Iranian territory or Iranian.
Or within reach of several possible targets.
Right.
On
the other hand, Trump said that he gives time now to April 6th, so there will be no bombardments. So there might be bombardments because Trump may say he didn't mean all bombardments, but some of the bombardments. Okay, or maybe he'll play taco by Monday to quiet the stock market.
One of his hallmarks, Sasha, as you and I and Ivan have all agreed during the course of the nearly 4 years we've been on this program, and especially with President Trump, is that President Trump's hallmark is unpredictability.
Yes,
he is his unpredictability, because strategic theorists would agree that being unpredictable enhances deterrence. It creates uncertainty in the minds of your opponent as to how you will react. That is positive. The downside to unpredictability is that it also keeps your allies off balance. they're not exactly sure. Okay, what's he going to do now? So they have to be equally concerned about what their ally is going to do, or is he going to continue to act like an ally? So this complicates diplomacy.
Well, Trump already said that look at NATO, look at them. They never provided any help. No, we don't need actually their help, but they, you know what, that's okay. I will remember.
Yeah. So yeah, it's well, keep in mind also that the Iranian leader is also practicing a bit of psychological warfare. As you note, in one of his recent statements, he's basically saying, he made a statement which he's saying to the American soldiers, is basically, come closer. I mean, that's pretty good psychological warfare. Okay, come closer. Let's get within fighting distance.
Wow. Well, we are in for some, actually, next few days may provide to be decisive in
Oh
this.
yeah, uh,
Yeah,
there, I have no doubt this is going to be. I say the one scenario that I hope does not occur is where the because we are not geared up for full mobilization. We are not a draft army. Yeah,
no,
even if you were to lay the groundwork for that, it would take several years to fully gear up for full mobilization and sending American troops to occupy Iran. That would be a really devastating and very, uh, again, very destabilizing on several fronts. So anyway, I'm hoping that President Trump limits the cost, achieves a limited victory, because that was the smart thing that former President George H. Herbert Walker Bush did back in the Persian Gulf. You
very
remember?
smart. I remember.
Very smart man.
Very smart.
Arguably the most qualified man, just looking at his resume, the most qualified president that we'd ever had, most experienced, variety of experience. And
For sure.
he stopped the war after he had kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. He did not go on to Baghdad. And he was asked, why didn't you go on to Baghdad? And his response was, to his everlasting credit, he said he did not want to get caught in the middle of a civil war.
Yeah, he was right. The
He was
only one shortcoming I still believe he had was after the collapse of Soviet Union.
yeah.
He didn't engraved in stone the result of the Cold War,
Right.
and
He did not press his advantage when he did not press his decisive strategic advantage when he had the chance. Yeah,
I
I
think
would agree.
maybe, just maybe to sort of justify his actions was maybe he wanted first to win U.S. election in '92, and after that he would do exactly that.
Right.
You know,
But
maybe,
he forgot what James Carville said. It's the economy, stupid. So
brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant. So 35 years since
yeah.
he first pronounced it. Yeah,
People need to learn from history. They need to
maybe
learn it.
Trump has to listen to this strategy.
Say what?
Maybe Trump has to be reminded of James Carville saying it's economy.
Well, I'm sure his advisors in a once they if they have sufficient moral courage and sufficient knowledge of history, they will remind him of that.
About
So in
that.
any case, it's all very fascinating. So in any case, I'm looking forward very much to next Tuesday's program as well. God
Yeah.
bless America.
Thank you. God bless Ukraine and America and Canada. And I wish you a great weekend and all our listeners. And we'll see you Tuesday. Bye bye, everybody.